There we go. And then I'll just. How do you make it bigger?
Yeah, that. Yeah, that one will do it.
Yep. Okay, cool. Let's take it away. Mascha has been doing her master's here, and she's looking at the availability of clinical ethics support services in New Zealand. So take it away, Mascha.
Okay, thank you very much for having me here in this forum to present my research, which is looking into the availability of clinical ethics support services here in New Zealand. Excellent. So my supervisors are John, Neil, and Janine. Janine Neil joined the party later at the end of last year, so there's now 3 of them. I've started my research project late 2022. It's been a bit drawn out. COVID happened and which as well. And also we did a big family move from Auckland to the South Island. So a couple of hurdles to take. Thank you. What am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about why did I do this research? What's the topic that I'm actually looking at? Briefly mention some of the literature review. How did I go about it in the research design? What are some of the results? Don't have enough time to go into everything. Some of the limitations of my study. What are some of the conclusions? And yeah, now what? How do we go forward with what we've learned? And then I would be very happy to have some questions and feedback from you all. So my background, why am I doing this? My background is in speech and language therapy. I've worked in the Netherlands, in the UK, but actually most of my career in New Zealand. And ethics has always been interesting to me. I actually wanted to study law before I became a speech and language therapist, and specializing in health law. Started studying law, hated it, became a speech and language therapist. But still that niggle and being aware of all the ethical issues kind of were present, especially actually being faced with it. And where do you go with that? People go to clinical ethics committees, or if they're available, would I do that? And the answer was actually standard no. They were too scary, too intimidating. I would feel like I was a failure, had to do it myself. And what would these people think of me if I would come with this problem? It's not big enough to go to a big committee. So kind of push that away on the side and just muddle along, talk with colleagues and hope for the best. Then came 2016. I was living and working in the Netherlands at that time in a hospital setting. And I was asked to train as a facilitator in moral case deliberations, which was a format that they introduced there in that was being used to work through ethical dilemmas in a clinic setting, where you have one facilitator that supports a team dealing with a complex ethical issue. And I joined that training and I was like, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. Yeah, so that's what I did. And then we moved to New Zealand. So got here, returned in 2017. My first move to New Zealand was in 1998. So we went backwards and forwards a bit. So different experiences in different parts of the country. Lived in Auckland, and I noticed when I was working in a hospital setting that it was still really tricky where one would go with a clinical ethics issue or an ethical dilemma. At the time I was working for Waitemata District Health Board, and I knew that in the past there was a clinical ethics advisory group, but when I started working there again, it wasn't there. Started talking with lots of people, and they said they had the group, but it kind of got disbanded because there were no ethical issues that people brought to the group. So it was not being used and therefore stopped. I was part of the group that set it back up again. And I was hoping to make them enthusiastic for moral case deliberations as well, but that didn't take off at the time. But so my personal experience showed that there wasn't a lot of support available for clinicians in the work setting, but there wasn't really much data that backed up my observations. And yeah, forward the clock, I started studying bioethics here as a postgrad student. And in 2019, I attended the AABHL conference here in Dunedin, and I attended a presentation from Bar1 Health. And that group looked at what type of clinical ethics support is available for their organization. And I remember sitting next to Janine, because we were at the same presentation, and I looked up to her. This would be a really nice master's project. And here I am doing it. So it really inspired me, like, could I do something similar here in New Zealand? Could there be potentially data gathered that would support the development of new clinical ethics support services in the country? Like, for example, moral case deliberations, because I'm still very passionate about that. So what's my research topic? My research topic, is finding out whether healthcare professionals in New Zealand feel supported in the field of clinical ethics. So, like I said before, my own professional experience, but also from the literature and informal pilot survey by informal conversations with people in the health sector, different areas of the health sector showed there was a gap around this topic. Yeah. So I did a literature review, looked at literature mostly published between 1998 and 2022, listed the databases that I used, mesh terms used like medical ethics, clinical ethics, ethics, bioethics, you name it, anything with ethics, but also looking at moral distress and morality, because that often, is present when there are ethical issues. Divided into geographical areas, New Zealand and Australia, because we're kind of from the similar, we're in a similar part of the world and having similar systems. USA and Canada as a separate area, and Europe, including the UK, even though it's not in Europe officially. The languages that I was able to use for the research was English and Dutch. So what came about from the literature review is that there are 4 main types of clinical ethics support that are seen in different clinic settings. So there's clinical ethics consultation, which could be with 1 or 2 people, clinical ethics committees like the CX, the clinical ethics advisory groups that we have here in New Zealand at certain places, moral case deliberation, like what is used a lot in the Netherlands, but also I think in Sweden a lot, and you see it in Germany as well, and I think Belgium's come up as well. And then there's more informal settings like ethics rounds, ethics discussion groups, ethics reflection groups. So this is very much focused on how people see, or how the literature says that clinical ethics supports are taking place. Yep. The research design, the outset was that it was going to be a quantitative research project, using a survey from the Bar1 organization that I adapted and I shortened quite a bit, because I think theirs was 64 questions. It was an online survey that was delivered via RedCap, which is the online thing, how it was delivered to people. It was a cross-sectional study, and the reason I wanted to approach it in that way is that I didn't want to just look at doctors. I wanted to hear from other people in the health sector as well, nursing staff, allied health, and not just people who work in a hospital, but also people in GP practices, private practices, or if you look at allied health, working in school systems, but still being part of the allied health medical background. My target group for the research was healthcare professionals in New Zealand, and in order to qualify as a healthcare professional, I chose to go with the group that was registered healthcare practitioners under the HPCA. But what I realized is that speech and language therapists don't fall under the HPCA, and I thought it was really important they would be included. So I also chose the professions that where the professional organisation is a member organisation of Allied Health New Zealand. So that is the group of people that joined. Yeah, I was approached by some that said, "Oh, can we join in as well?" That were like herbal medicine or diploma wellness and relaxation massage. And no, they were excluded because they didn't fall under those categories. The recruitment to join in with the survey was by email invitation to professional bodies, employers or employer organizations like Aged Care Association, at snowball sampling via my own networks and asking them to roll it forward. Problem with that was that I just have no idea where it actually ended up. Some employers forwarded it to their employees, others published it in their newsletters, others put it on their websites. So it was a bit, yeah, that was the risk I took. Yep. The survey consisted of 3 sections. Ethical issues in clinical situations was the first one. Second one, support for dealing with ethically complex or challenging situations, and the demographics. Different types of questions were asked, like Likert scale, rating, multiple choice, open-ended, demographic. And the total number of questions was 33. Yep. So this is an example of questions that were being asked. And I think the only question that was, well, not the only, but my most important question of my survey for me was B16. Do you feel that enough clinical ethics support is available at your place of work? Because that's really what I wanted to know, how people thought about that. And the other one was interesting as well, B17. If you would think more support would be useful, what do you think might be useful? When you look at some of the results, the survey opened on the 10th of August 2021 and it remained open to the 31st of December 2021. It was open for quite a while. The 10th, I was full of beans excited, and because A, I was about to go on holiday, and B, my survey was going to be live. Roll on the 17th of August, away on holiday in Queenstown, husband having a birthday, and for his birthday, he got locked down because Delta had entered the community, and yeah, there went our holiday dreams, but more so my survey. It's like, oh shit, because from now on, if this is going to spread, my response rates are going to be very low, and it's going to yeah, affect how I can also market my research. So my response rate was had 121 people who filled it out, so I'm excited about that. But if you look at that, the doctor's workforce in 2021 was 18,000 people, then only having 121 people is not a lot. Nursing staff more than 56,000. So my response rate is completely low, which is disappointing, but it is what it is. Most of the respondents were doctors, and the 2 other groups that were, yeah, mostly represented were chiropractors, which surprised me, counsellors as well. And if you think of, you know, what I just said, nursing staff, more than 56,000, then there's not a lot of nurses who took part in the research. Saying that, it was COVID, it was crazy in the hospitals, and people had other things in their mind than my research. Yep. Oh no, sorry. First, can you go back? Yeah, if you look at ethnicity, most of the respondents were of European background. Māori only represented 4% in the survey, which I found initially disappointing. But I looked up what is actually the percentage of New Zealand doctors who are Māori, and that's actually 4.3%. So if you look at that, I thought, well, oh, actually, it may be disappointing, but it's actually interesting, and it's potentially in line with. And if you look at Pacific peoples, in my survey, it was only 3%, and in the medical New Zealand workforce, it's only 2.1%. So if you compare those groups, then that was yeah, potentially interesting. Yep. So my main question: healthcare professionals actually feel that there's enough clinical ethics support at their place of work. Only 25% answered this question with yes. So but saying that is 25% only of my sample size, but that's not a lot. But looking at my own experiences, it's not too bad. Yep, I'll go to the next one. And when we look at the question, what formal support for dealing with clinical ethics committees is available in your place of work? These answers were given. Looking at, in my opinion, the two main forms of clinical ethics support, namely the CAGs and the committees, that's only 13% for the committees and 6% for clinical ethics consultants. So not many people have access to that. Again, I knew that from informal conversations and observations, but I had no data as yet. Interestingly, a lot of people ticked policy and guidelines as their go-to place for clinical ethics support. I see that as a useful tool to kind of know how you kind of are supposed to act when you carry out a procedure or treatment or assess, but I personally do not go to guidelines for clinical ethics support. Legal advice and Medical Protection Society also score quite high, which to me is more like a risk management approach, as in, you know, if I do this, I'm going to end up in trouble, rather than looking at, am I doing the right thing? Because, you know, not just from a legal, I need to protect myself, but am I doing the right thing for this person? Yep. Next one. Then if I compare the data from the question whether people feel there's enough clinical access support with their different ethnic backgrounds, then we can see some clear differences in experience with the overall conclusion being that for the ethnic groups, the current available processes are clearly not sufficient. So that's definitely something that would be interesting to look at further, and how can we make sure that what we have serves all the people. If we look at the question, if you think more clinical ethics support would be useful, what do you think might be helpful? Then some interesting answers can be seen. Policy guidelines still score high, but ethics education and having an ethics trained team member show at minimum an interest in learning more about this topic, which I thought was a good thing to see. Having access to clinical ethics and or a CAG are also seen as potentially helpful, but maybe less so, as people have not really been exposed to these forms of clinical ethics support, so maybe they don't know how they can be helpful. So yeah, that again would be something interesting to look at. If we look at the people who did have the access to either a CAG or an ethics consultant, and combine these with the results from the questions, if they had enough access to clinical ethics support, then if you look at the 16 people who had access to the CAG, only 5 reported they had enough access to clinical ethics support. So even though they had it, they still didn't tick the box in yes, while you would expect if they had access to CAG, they would say yes, at least. That would be an assumption that I would like to make. On the other hand, when you look at the clinical ethics consultant, where it's more like a personal approach, of the 7 people who said they had enough access, 6 of those felt that the clinical ethics consultant approach was good, and only 1 didn't know, so was unsure, it wasn't a clear no. So what this shows, or what this potentially shows, is that, yeah, maybe a more personalized approach would be preferred over committees, which I would also kind of identify with looking at myself, like, would I ever go to a big CAG with the things that I've dealt with as a clinician? And my answer would be no, but would I approach like a one-on-one person or one in my team person, then I would feel much more inclined to do that. But the sample size, again, is very slow. But if we compare these results with the other comparisons in other groups, if we ask the same questions and then the majority is only the one with the clinical ethics consultant showed such a positive view. Yep. So what are the limitations of the study? Well, the number of the respondents was too low for the results to be representative of the study population. Limited response rate, potentially linked with COVID-19 Delta outbreak at the time of the survey going live. I've got limited insight into whether the survey reached the target group because of all that, and also how the recruitment occurred. It's likely not to have a complete section of all across all health professionals, and although the percentage that I said earlier about people from other ethnic backgrounds than European is small. I would really like to see some more data from other ethnicities than European. Yep. Some of the conclusions. Only 25% of the respondents feel that they have enough access to clinical ethics support. This potentially applies that New Zealand healthcare professionals feel not effectively supported in their clinical ethics decision making. Second one, that ongoing ethics education is seen as potentially helpful by the respondents. And the only group who was fully satisfied with a form of available clinical ethics support was the group who had access to a clinical ethics consultant. And this implies that a more individual personal approach should be considered for looking at increasing access to clinical ethics support. And some further potential research ideas, like I mentioned before, looking at experiences of people with other backgrounds than European. For example, a qualitative research project into New Zealand clinical ethics supports in partnership with Māori. Another research project could be, do healthcare professionals truly understand what clinical ethics support is? And I'm just linking that back to the answers about their TIC guidelines a lot as a place to go, but also the legal department and a place like Medical Protection Society. Are they really able to make the distinction between like research ethics, defensive medicine, clinical ethics, legal advice, or is it in fact a semantic problem and they actually don't understand what clinical ethics means? What would be interesting to do as well would be a pilot study to look into for New Zealand new types of clinical ethics support services, like more case deliberation. I keep harping on about it, it's my thing. I think also development of education programs for healthcare professionals for ongoing clinical ethics educations in the workplace. So people feel more confident themselves and they have better support to their clinical colleagues. And that was my long research journey till now. Yeah, that's the story.
Oh, so does anyone have any questions?
Well, just a very, very specific question, although it does, I think, relate to something that puzzles you a little bit. So when you first showed some results which mentioned policy guidelines, that was how you described it. People had indicated that policy and guidelines was a go-to place for them. Later on, when you looked at data, you described that as protocols and guidelines. And it strikes me that a protocol is rather different
that was
policy.
A miswording.
Well, right. So the question is, which one is right? Because
hang on, I'll just make
not that you might not still have questions about
policy/guidelines.
Okay, so I would expect that to mean stuff from the Ministry of Health and local guidelines and policies about what to do. If it was protocols, then I'd expect that to be treatment guidelines and that kind of thing. If you see this, then do that. So I suspect that nobody is thinking that you go to a protocol for how to treat someone in order to sort out their ethical problems.
No, but I think still policy and guidelines to me. I've seen
Yeah,
lots of.
it doesn't mean that
ethical
you're wrong to think there's
Yeah.
something interesting there. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that.
I did want to ask about this too, about how much we can infer from their responses to that. So, have you got a copy of the actual question to hand, Mascha, exactly how that's worded?
I can, hang on.
I think they were offered it as an
As
option.
an option, yeah. So
It was an option, it
what,
was,
yeah, what forms of clinical support are?
can you go
ethics
back
support?
to slide 14?
Determine whether they can tick multiple.
Yeah, they
Well,
get-
yeah, for example, but I mean, I'm just, and this is maybe obvious, but it's just,
No, 2 down. No, as in, sorry, further along.
if you say.
Yeah, so the question is, what types of available
Yeah.
ethics support what types of formal ethics support are available in your place of work?
And
Tick as many as
yeah, and
apply.
policy guidelines are an option.
Hmm.
So then I think if I was filling out that survey,
Yeah, tick it.
it's like, it's been offered to me as an option that I could select, and so I'd ask myself as well, yeah, we do have policies. So I put that, but it doesn't represent my confidence in that as a resource, if you
Yeah.
follow. So that,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was, and I was like, should I put it in there? But then it's like, because I
It's
would
hard,
never
yeah.
tick it.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I use for clinical ethics support? Not
Yeah.
that, so I wouldn't tick it. But then I think more about ethics than other people maybe, so,
But because
yeah.
you've said
Yeah.
what's available rather
Yeah.
than what would you use.
yeah.
Yeah, I had the same thought as Simon, because you've put it there as an option. Yep, we've got a policy.
I should have read this question. Can't go back now.
well, the most, what you can report is that that number said, well, yeah,
Yeah.
we've got policies, we're aware of them and they connect with them.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what they don't think.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Thank you, that was really, really interesting. You might not have been able to unpick this from the responses, but your examples of, I think it was 7 people who had access to an ethics consultant who also said that they felt their ethics support was good. Do you know if that's all coming from one site? Is there somewhere where possibly all these people were working that's got possibly an exemplary service?
I don't know whether that's from a site. I can look up, are they specific profession?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I can't look up, are they specific ethnicity?
I
But
thought that
can't
might
look
be
up a
the-
site.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, because that might be interesting to
Yeah.
just to think about. I also thought your second point on your future directions was really interesting about what are clinicians' understanding of what the ethical aspects of decision making actually are, and how good some clinicians' insight is into what's the moral aspect of a decision and what's the more procedural aspect of a decision. I've not thought about it from that angle before. I think that's really
I think I have
interesting.
no clue, to be honest.
Yeah.
When they word ethics, no, when they hear the word ethics, they fear to research ethics. And even when I've explained to people what my research is, oh yeah, you're doing it. Yeah, no, and then they start telling me, when I was doing this research, I was like, no,
Yeah.
actually, it's you as a clinician on the work floor with the patient in front of your
Yeah.
face, not about the research project that you're doing outside the clinic. People have, and even when you explain, they have no clue.
That could also be a reason why people are saying, oh, we've got the policies and guidelines, because they think ethics is what you do. Well, what you do is you look up this guideline that tells us what to do in a question of what treatment direction to go in. Yeah, really interesting.
We talked about this when you were preparing, but it might be good to say why you had policies in there.
Yeah, it was,
The pilot. Basically,
it
it
was-
was.
yeah, no, it was in the original from bar one. And yeah, I just left it in there.
The same could be said for the legal advice. Because although there is overlap between law and ethics, there is distinction between the two. So that might, so just the option of having it there might say, yeah, we do.
No, but actually people, that's also what came from my informal
Right.
discussion I had. And I was gobsmacked when I asked people, like, so where do you go? And they're like, oh, I contact the legal department, or oh, I contact NPS. And I'm like, what is NPS? Because I didn't know that. So I figured it out. Contacted NPS and said, if you have people, I've heard that people contact you with clinical ethics decisions, like, oh no, we don't do that, we just do legal stuff. I'm here, so what do you do then? Do you not provide that? Because people say you do. Oh no, we pass them on. I'm like, where do you send them? On the bioethics center in Dunedin. Right.
I think this reveals a really interesting problem with the whole research area, is that the different perceptions of what it is. And it's quite hard to get past that. And it's very natural, I think, if clinicians confronted by a difficult situation, their first question might be, how do I not get into trouble? So, yeah, I do know of a number of clinicians that will not, it just sort of, ethics is a wee bit alien, and I think what they do is what they do. And they're probably negotiating ethical problems quite a lot. I wonder if there's sort of a primary study that one could do to try and get at the language around this, because your project is actually to persuade people there's a need for a certain kind of service.
Yeah, but if they don't understand what you're talking about, then how they're going to
Exactly.
there's a need.
Yes.
Yeah.
I reckon that could probably fill a discussion in your masters. I don't know how far.
I told her,
Yeah.
this last supervision, I was saying that there's a linguistics problem, that if you don't have if your language doesn't have a word for a concept, then it's really hard for people to categorize into that. And I feel like New Zealand actually is an outlier in the English language discussion of ethics. When in the US, when you say ethics, the default is clinical ethics, not research ethics, or business. I mean, ethics, I guess business ethics would, if somebody's cheating, that would be the first go-to, and research ethics is way down the list.
Was there any ability to compare your results with the bar ones? Were they substantially different? Or?
There's a possibility to do that, but I haven't got that ready right now.
No, okay.
I was wondering what they found in the policy. If they use those same measures, what do you even up to that?
No. I can.
It's not
Good
yet,
idea.
not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
I will do that.
One of the other things I was thinking about in this is perhaps the next longer presentation would be to show some of the language when you introduce this, how you guide the survey taker about the definition of clinical ethics. Like, is this understanding of clinical ethics as potentially as MPS and legal and policies, despite you having cued them that you're trying to get at a dilemma that isn't easy to solve with policy.
Yeah.
Could you use I was thinking, could you use an example? But then you'd have to have an example that works across all professions.
But that's just a good finding from the study, isn't it? That there's some kind of overarching issue that's perhaps not being.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a perfectly valid finding of the study.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something do something further about, maybe.
So, you're going to ask, and one individuals seem to be the preferred, what people preferred, and I think I'd like to be a better as well for the reasons that you said. But did you ask about why they? So why was there a preferred or a good option?
No.
For them? So there's that question, and there's also the question of, okay, well, that might be what people prefer, but does it lead to some good outcomes? Like, is there a good way of doing ethics? And my intuition is no, probably having a group of people is better.
Yeah,
But
no,
if it's not going to be used.
No, and that's why I like the moral case deliberations, because you have a facilitator who doesn't, you don't go to the facilitator to get the question answered. The facilitator guides the team that has the ethical dilemma to come to their own conclusions.
Right. So when they went to a single person, they were given an answer. Like,
I think so. That's what I think, because when you talk about a clinical ethics consultant, then it's like, I talk to you, I give you my problem and then maybe I don't know. I mean, I haven't got that.
It might be, but it might also be, I've got a problem, can you just be a sounding board? For me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Sinead's research is related to this. She was asking PG1 and 2 what ethical problems they're encountering and what helped them. Do you know Sinead, the palliative care doctor in Wellington?
No.
Hers was a qualitative study. So she interviewed 13 over 45 periods of her masters on. But what they identified as ethical issues was more like this sort of thing where you'd need, that was awful what I just went through. What happened, you know,
Yeah.
and they need someone to talk to. It's not that it was a dilemma as such, but they identified it as an ethical problem. And the thing that they needed was support and sort of just acknowledgement that was hard, but it'd be okay, you get through it. So I imagine that one-to-one stuff is really helpful for that kind of problem, but it's quite hard to design a survey that'll pick all this out.
Yeah.
I can see, it'd be great stuff to put in the discussion. I've heard you lay all that sort of spectrum out before, when you think about clinical ethics, maybe with Janine as well. Like there's a range of things we can call ethics support.
Yeah, no, and I think, because the sample size is small, it's hard to make conclusions that come from this. And it was, people said, like, don't go so wide, you failed, because you will have little bits of everything. You should go qualitative and interview people. But if I'd done that, then again, I would have only been interviewing 13 people. And I was really keen to have some information from a wider range of professionals. The result is I've only got 121 and it's not a lot of people, but I do have some information now also from physios and some from nurses and some from speech therapists and some from mental health people. So I feel I've got now the start of something that at least gives a broader view than just nurses or doctors. And we didn't have that in New Zealand yet. Now we've got it.
Just a very small thing. On where you had the amount of people from each profession, you had nurses split into mental health and physical health, but not GPs. Well, not doctors. So psychiatrists weren't split apart from.
Oh, I've got all the separate data.
Yeah. So when you look, so your responses from nurses might actually be quite high, like in line with doctors. If you.
If I add them.
Maybe you could go back to it.
Yeah. I thought, but if we added them together, they might look quite different.
That's small.
Are they? Yeah, no, they're not. No, yeah, you're right. They're not nowhere near as high as.
But it is a question about how you present.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, no, but I can put that
combine
together.
this.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. But then I add midwives. Do I add midwives to nurses?
No.
So we don't know.
Is it
I wouldn't have either.
Okay.
When you're doing a response rate, it's obviously the potential participant group. Do we have any sense of what that number is?
Oh,
Sorry if I missed that in the details.
I've looked up all
It would
the
be
registers. It's like thousands. Doctors were no, because
The trouble, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because if I understood your recruitment method, you just went for every kind of, let's find these healthcare professionals. Like,
yeah, it was just like this, poof, throw a bomb and hope that people
Yeah.
pick up a lead.
it's hard.
But it was a mediated thing, wasn't it? So you never personally sent emails to every doctor.
No. So I had to go
Instead, you
through
went to them,
DHBs.
a DHB.
Yeah.
So you're entirely relying on them to
No,
So-
and if we hadn't had COVID, then because it was in Auckland, I would have kind of thrown myself around at least
Okay.
the wards where I used to work. It's like,
Yeah.
hello, can I just, my
Gotcha.
day off, can I just
get a bit more.
come round and do some direct marketing of my research?
But I'm not a statistician, but I wonder if to get statistical power, you'd probably want to say, let's get this list of 300, email them and keep track of them. So I'm thinking about if one was able to do this again, like what's the
No,
best way?
well, the best way to
get
do that
example?
is start working with the biostatics department, biostatisticians from the word go, and not when.
Because you never would have sampled, you never would have got
Teams.
a high response rate from every single medical professional in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
So you would want to have like a controlled, like you say, like
Yeah.
make the power and then aim for that.
Yeah.
Get the power.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how you'd really need a lot of biostatistics support to figure out who you wanted to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
it's
what they
start
said. They
with,
said start.
300 you wanted to pick.
I would have, if we had had biostatistics from the word from
Yeah,
before approval, before ethics approval.
Yeah.
the picture would have been different, but we didn't. We,
There was a lot of
we,
flights about
Yeah.
it.
we asked them too late and then they got cranky. And yeah,
So,
now,
I mean, it's an interesting question because we have been thinking of using that language, but actually I think the way you've done it here, not attempting to use any of that language, not making any of those claims, or as it were, failing to make them, is very sensible.
but it made me kind of scared that if I ever want to write this up in an article, people are just going to blow it. to
No.
pieces.
Well, I think you
Not
do.
if you don't claim what you haven't done.
I was thinking, so probably not even worth mentioning percentages, for
No,
example,
that's
just say
okay.
this number
Yeah.
said this.
Well, that's the percentage of
Yeah,
the
yeah, but it's- what
respondents.
does it
You
mean?
always do that.
No, but not if you've only
No,
got
no,
129
no.
responses. I
Well,
mean,
And if you don't know how many people you've actually sent it out to through Snowball.
no, I don't think it's unreasonable to say what percentage of your original N responded, even if you're not making claims about it being a percentage of the.
No, I think up till yesterday, this slide didn't have percentages, but the actual numbers, and I thought they probably want to have percentages. So I changed this, I changed it yesterday.
Well, particularly when you started reporting on what certain individuals said, I thought the percentage is a distraction. This is what
Okay.
just 16 people said this. That's sort of more meaningful to me, but you know, granted, others might read differently. I was a bit surprised by that. I think I heard you say something about the definition of a healthcare practitioner under the HBCA. Was it back a slide? Maybe? So what is the thing right near the start?
That was
The healthcare.
Yeah. Does that cover? Does it not cover certain groups?
It doesn't, no, so,
Oh, no, it's not.
who does it cover? Hang on, I can look it up, but there's a whole lot of, so speech and
Yeah.
language therapists are not covered by it.
So what is the definition? There's a technical point, but
It's,
I
it's
thought it was
got,
anything with a professional body
no,
delivers healthcare. Okay.
no, there was actually there was a big group that
Yeah.
was covered under allied health, but not under
Huh.
HPCA, and I think it depends on I think a body can decide whether they want to be under HPCA, so the speech and language therapists wanted to be self-governed, which, yeah, I question, but hey, who am I? I know, yeah. I mean, I've got the big list of who's all under, it's all in my thesis.
Right. No, I mean, it's an incidental going fact about a legal system.
Marcia, you said that you couldn't look at an individual site, but you could look at professions to see if a certain profession had better.
Yeah.
Was there any interesting findings there?
Not,
Not sure.
not sure. It's in one of my, it's in one of my pictures. It's one of the data. set
Yeah,
things.
because I thought, because I've worked in the mental health bit,
Hang on then.
like mental health nurses, they do quite a lot of supervision, and I would hope that they would say, yes, we have had quite good clinical ethics, because, but also it's a lot of, they're going to come up with a lot more stuff that is potentially more problematic. So I was, yeah, I was
Okay,
just
yes,
thinking about that.
mental health. I think this is it. I've got people said they had good. If I read this correct, but I haven't got all the words here, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking because it just said B3 versus C30. Yes, says mental health 39%. That's actually the highest group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting.
Yeah, medical, only 19% says yes, and allied health, 32%. Yeah, so medical's actually the lowest with 19%. Nursing says yes, 33%, but mental health is the most positive. Yeah.
So I'm obviously one of Masha's supervisors. I found her slides, her conciseness, her length of presentation, all excellent. Do you guys have any feedback other?
Well, I know you know a lot more about this topic. When I engage with it, I like the conceptual questions. So I think maybe if you're doing this again, maybe it's like saying what you understand by clinical ethics to frame the problem for your audience as well.
Yeah.
So because we work that out in our post, discussion is like what in fact were the people thinking when they responded to that. So showing your knowledge would probably be a good thing to do. Yeah.
And putting that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. No, that's all.
I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot.
Nice job.
Sorry, you don't need to apologise for how long it's taken, like,
Yeah.
people don't care.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you've done an amazing job. Like you don't
Yeah.
need to, you don't need to say, oh, it's taken me so long. I mean, you can if you want, but I just don't think
Yeah.
you should feel bad about that.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
this is like,
Just be finished, because I'm the
Yeah.
same, but I mean, actually.
if you're doing a whole PhD.